Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. This is a Lyme disease webinar where we talk about Lyme disease and learn about Lyme disease based on your questions. No 2 weeks are the same because they're all dependent upon what you ask me. To the best of my ability, I'll try to answer your questions, and usually I can answer most of them. Sometimes I get stumped, and sometimes I just don't have a good answer for you. So we'll see what happens here tonight. For those of you that are new, the way that you participate in the webinar is to listen, number one, to some of the responses that I have. You may learn something from that. But if you have a question for me, there's a chat box over here on the lowest part of your computer, right down there on the right-hand side. Write your question to me through that chat box. The only thing I ask, though, is that you don't click the enter key in the middle of writing your complete question. And the reason is that each time you click that enter key, it actually sends question to me. So it gets to be hard to kind of chase around the different parts of your question on my side. I'm glad to see new faces here tonight. And I'm also very glad to see that we've got a number of people that have returned again. So that means you're getting some value out of this, and I'm glad you are. My goal is to help as many people as possible with these webinars that I have. I am creating a recording of the webinar, and tomorrow morning, somewhere around, say, probably tomorrow morning, somewhere before around 8 or 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, I should, if everything goes as planned, get that webinar recording out to you through the email. If you happen to miss it, you can also find a copy of it on my YouTube channel. You can find a copy of it on Facebook, because I posted it on Facebook as well too. And then I always include a copy of it on the front page of my supplement store, which is Marty Ross MD Supplements, and I include a copy of it on the webinars page at my Lyme disease education site, which is Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. So there's a lot of places you can find it if you happen to miss it. Okay, all right. So it's really hot in Austin today. It's got up to, I think, about 105-ish or so. And so I'm not wearing a sports jacket tonight. It's just too hot. Even with air conditioning on, you can feel it coming through here. And the poor Basidjis have been kind of wiped out too. They're over here just kind of snoozing on the floor. We didn't even get a chance to do our long walk today, given the heat. So anyhow, let's go ahead and get started here. Oh, during the webinar, I will be posting questions so that everyone could see them. They'll show up on your screen. However, if you're in the recorded version of the webinar, if you're listening to one of the recorded versions, because the questions don't show up in the recorded version, so I will read them, okay, as part of the webinar tonight too. All right. So this is our first question. This is from Nancy. Hi, Nancy. Let's see. How soon after tick bite would the Bartonella striae, the stretch marks, appear if the tick is carrying Bart? How long does it take for the stria to disappear? Is it possible to have Bart and be asymptomatic? Let me handle all those parts first, okay? To be honest with you, I'm not quite sure. I haven't seen any studies that tell me how quickly the striae appear, and is there any consistency in how quickly they disappear when somebody is being treated for Bartonella. I'm not aware of the actual timeline on that. I can tell you that for some people with Bartonella, even as I've treated them and all their Bartonella symptoms got better, sometimes the striae don't go away. That's not uniform, but that does happen with some of the people in terms of the striae, okay? Let's see. Oh, in terms of how long does it take to get rid of Bartonella, let's just talk about that really quickly. On a treatment, usually find if the treatment is working, it's going to take about 4 to 6 months to get rid of Bartonella. For those of you that wonder how you treat Bartonella, I'm not going to show you right now, but I have at my Lyme disease education site, which is Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD, I do have an article which is called Kills Bartonella, a brief guide, and that has various herbal and prescription antibiotic regimens that you can use. I generally recommend using at least 2 agents at the same time, because I tend to find better results that way. And in my Seattle practice, I found by using 2 agents, sometimes you might have to use a second round, but usually about 95% of the time, I was able to get rid of Bartonella, okay, with most of my patients, all right? And the way that you gauge whether you're getting rid of Bartonella is to look at Bartonella symptoms, because our testing isn't that good. If you're wondering what those Bartonella symptoms are, I'm not going to describe it right now. There is an article on my Lyme disease education site, which is How to Diagnose Bartonella. Read that article. I list out all the Bartonella symptoms that are useful to follow in terms of figuring out if your treatment is working, but also in terms of trying to figure out, do you have Bartonella? Okay, actually, I'll show you both of those articles you just talked about here in a minute. All right. Okay, then let's see here. Is it possible to have Bartonella and be asymptomatic? It's possible. If your immune system is doing a good job, it may be able to deal with the infection and keep it under control or get rid of it. Okay, so yeah, it's possible. Let's see, what is the ideal zinc supplement you would recommend for someone who is vegetarian? I don't have an ideal one. If I look at the various forms you wrote here, I am not sure which one is a better one to use if you're vegetarian. That is something I would actually have to look into to find out. If you were to come and see me in my practice, that's what I would do. I'd tell you I have to get back to you. I have to educate myself on that. So I just don't know that one off the top of my head. Okay? All right. So let me do a quick screen share here, everyone. All right. So this is my Lyme disease education site, which is Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. On here, the key part of this is my online Lyme guide. You can find it right there, okay? And so in terms of infection treatment plans, I mentioned I have an article about how to take care of Bartonella. You would find it in the infection treatment plan section, and it's this article called Kills Bartonella, a brief guide, okay? And then if you want information about how to diagnose something or what the symptoms might be of something, take a look at this section over here. It's in my Lyme disease 101 section, How to Diagnose. And I have an article called Is it Bartonella? And I talk about how you primarily use symptoms to figure out if you have Bartonella. So take a look at that article as well too, okay? All right, let me go back here. There we go. I found a hard time finding the right button to click there. All right. Thanks for that question, Nancy. Good luck to you. All right. Next question is from Nina. Hello, Nina. Good to see you here again. Let's see. Hi again. Nina from Niagara on the Lake. Thank you so much for your help in your previous webinar. You're welcome. You're welcome. Let's see. You had strongly suggested that I treat for yeast overgrowth as my energy decreased overnight by 75%. I can't remember from the past yeast treatment, so I thought I would ask this question. Is it possible to experience crazy strong sugar cravings when on the yeast treatment, even though I didn't have those sugar cravings before I started with treatment? Presently eating paleo, daily supplements, probiotics, biocidin, LSF, 1 pump a day, nystatin, 2 pills, 2 times a day. What do you think of this? By the way, in 2016, Lamisil caused rhabdomyolysis. Also, although I don't eat sugary products, I eat 2 to 3 fruits daily. Also, is it okay to have an occasional gin drink, or does this make yeast worse? Thanks so much. So happy you'll be starting up practice again. Woohoo. Yeah. So many of you know I am going to be going back into practice. The Washington Medical Board that was creating a lot of problems for me and seemed poised to take my license has decided not to. So I will be working my way back from Austin, Texas here to reopen my practice eventually. And you'll be hearing more about that as I get my plans a little bit more finalized, actually. Anyhow, Nina, the thing about the yeast treatment that you're doing, so the part of your treatment that is really targeted at killing yeast would be the nystatin and also the biocidin, okay? Those two together. There are stronger ways to treat yeast than that, and that would be to use, instead of that biocidin, you might want to use another prescription. So nystatin is a prescription, and it's kind of a medium strength yeast killer. Biocidin, I would call a medium strength yeast killer. It's a supplement that has a number of herbs in it that can treat Lyme, kill Lyme, and also can treat yeast as well too. But usually a situation like this, I would want to use something stronger in addition to the nystatin. And the prescriptives that you might consider using, most of those fall in a class called the azoles. That would be fluconazole, itraconazole. Those would be the big ones. The one that you had a reaction to that you wrote about here, I'm just trying to see what the name was, is Lamisil, which is in a totally different family than the azole. So rhabdomyolysis, everyone, means that her muscle cells broke down. So it was a bad problem to get. And it can occasionally happen with various prescription antibiotics, but also prescription antifungals too, okay? So Nina, you might want to talk with your existing healthcare doctors to see if they could help look at some of my other prescription ideas that I list out in my yeast treatment article. Those would be itraconazole, fluconazole. Now, fluconazole is diflucan, and more we're seeing yeast being resistant to it, but that's an option. Ketoconazole is in that family. The strongest way to actually get rid of yeast, but it tends to take a little bit longer, is to use a compounded medication that can be quite expensive called amphoterecin B. Amphoterecin B has one advantage, in that it is not absorbed, well, barely absorbed out of the intestines into the bloodstream. So people tend not to have problems with having side effect problems with it. But it's very strong and does a good job getting rid of yeast, but it often will take 2 months instead of a 30 days that a azole type prescription might, okay? So amphotericin needs to be mixed up by a compounding pharmacy. And the reason it has to be mixed up by a compounding pharmacy is that it's actually manufactured to be given IV. And so a compounding pharmacist has to turn it into a pill, all right? That's why a compounding pharmacy gets involved. The dose that I usually found effective in my patients in Seattle was 200 milligrams 3 times a day. My local compounding pharmacy in Seattle was able to do that for about $240 for a 1-month supply. My Canadian suppliers that were helping my patients up there were doing it more in the range of about $600. So it can kind of become expensive. You might see if some of your prescribing doctors where you are have the ability to work with a compounding pharmacy and maybe get it at a lower cost, okay? Now, the one thing about amphotericin, that if you do it, you do not need to be on nystatin, and you definitely won't need to be on that, on the Biocidin LSF, okay? Because it can work as a standalone prescription medicine, okay? But again, it takes about 2 months to get yeast all the way under control using that, okay? All right. In terms of an occasional gin, gin is going to have some sugar in it. Obviously, it's gin, but it's going to be more minimal. I don't find any harm in doing that occasionally for a person, okay? Let's see here. I'm just reading. I like the fact that you're doing paleo. I don't think you're having too much sugar with those 2 to 3 fruits in a day either. Okay. All right. Thank you for that question, Nina, and good luck to you. Oh, let me just show everyone. I'm going to do a quick screen share here too. All right, so back at my Lyme disease education site. And if you're wondering what are these drugs that I was just talking about and ways to treat yeast, again, look in my infection treatment plan section. There is an article I have called Kills Yeast, a Brief Guide. And again, and actually, I just finally created a whole video to go with that about how to use various agents. But up here, I list using the diflucan. I talk about other things you can do, like the amphotericin B. Okay? All right. All right, there we are. Hello, Pat. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. How can I tell if my mitochondria are damaged? I've got extremely low energy and debilitating fatigue and have been treating with cemento, banderol, cryptolepis, hutania, curcumin, and ashwagandha. Please forgive me if I've asked this before. I'm not remembering. Thank you for these webinars. They are invaluable. You're welcome. So the thing about mitochondria dysfunctions, everyone, mitochondria are the energy factories that are found in every one of our cells, okay? And by some estimates, there's 300 to 400 of these energy factories found in our cells. The problem is in chronic Lyme disease, sometimes they can become injured. They can also become injured in mold toxicity illness as well, too. What happens is, especially in Lyme disease, is that as the immune system is trying to get rid of Lyme, it makes a lot of oxidizing agents. And these oxidizing agents can actually damage the covering of the mitochondria. The covering of mitochondria is made up of a double layer of fat, okay? Now, you need a healthy covering on the mitochondria for a couple reasons. Number one, that healthy fat membrane helps absorb or carry sugar and fat to the inside of the mitochondria, where it's burned through a bunch of chemical reactions to create a cell fuel, which is called ATP, all right? And if that membrane is damaged, you don't get enough intake of the fuel that mitochondria needs to create the cell energy chemical called ATP. All right. Secondly, that covering of the mitochondria donates electrons into a bunch of the chemical reactions where sugar and fat are burned into cell fuel. Okay. And so if that covering is damaged, there's not adequate donation of electrons to create cell fuel. And so sometimes you'll get interference that way too. Now, we really don't have a great way of testing for mitochondrial dysfunction. There are some labs that can test for some of the chemicals that are made in the chemical reactions that create cell fuel to see if you're having the correct amount of them produced. The trouble is the testing hasn't been normalized to really tell, what are the correct normal levels that we might find in people, right? And I just don't find it to be reliable. What I have found better is to try knowing that that it is a possibility that the reason people keep having low energy in Lyme is that they may have mitochondria injury. What I suggest in my treatment guideline, the Ross Lyme Support Protocol, is that at about 6 to 9 months into treatment, if you're just not getting much improvement in energy, then it's at that point that you might want to try at least a 2-month trial of taking things that are targeted at repairing the mitochondria, okay? All right, now, before going there, make sure you've done the basic steps though. So as part of the Ross Lyme Support Protocol, I talk about basic things that can improve your energy. And one of those is killing your germs, okay, that are causing your health problems. Secondly, taking things to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, that improves energy. Make sure that you've done things to lower your inflammatory cytokines. So cytokines get made by white blood cells when they see infection, and those cytokines are supposed to turn on the immune system, but if they get made in too great of an amount, they actually can suppress the immune system and they give you most of your Lyme disease symptoms, all right? So I recommend people take something called curcumin to help lower those cytokines. I also, as part of basic steps anyone should be doing to help with their energy, be on something known as an adaptogen, an herb that helps people get more energy by supporting the adrenal and the thyroid. And the herb I like for that is something called ashwagandha. It comes to us out of Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine, all right? I also suggest people correct for hormonal abnormalities, thyroid and adrenal. I talk about that in the Ross Lyme Support Protocol. I also talk about getting yeast out because, again, if yeast is in you, it's going to trigger more cytokine production, which is going to keep you fatigued. Okay, now, if you've done all that, the basic steps of the Ross Lyme Support Protocol, and you're still experiencing really low energy by around 6 to 9 months into treatment, it's at that point that I suggest doing steps to repair the mitochondria, okay? All right. Now, the steps you would do to repair the mitochondria, one is fix the fat membrane, all right? And there's a number of products you can use to do that. One of those is called NT factor. There's another one called ATP fuel, and there's another one called ATP 360. All right. Now, I discussed the differences in the article about mitochondrial repair. I'll show you that in a minute. All right. All right. Second thing you want to do is to be on a good antioxidant. Remember, I said it's oxidizing agents that are damaging the mitochondrial membrane. So you want to be on a good antioxidant to repair, to get rid of all those oxidizing agents. And also, a good antioxidant will start to repair the mitochondria from the inside. So NT factor or ATP fuel or ATP 360, they're all going to repair from the outside. You also want to start doing repair work from the inside. And that antioxidant I like to use is something called glutathione. I suggest people take a liposomal variety of it. Research Nutritionals makes a product called a Trifortify Orange and Trifortify Watermelon. Those are all liposomal varieties of glutathione, which are designed to increase the absorption of the glutathione, so you actually build up good levels in the mitochondria. Okay. The third step I suggest that people do in part of mitochondrial repair is if they are vegetarians, they should be taking a supplement called a carnitine. I like a variety called acetyl L-carnitine. Carnitine is an amino acid found in red meat that is the transport vehicle that carries fat to the inside of the mitochondria. Okay, so if you're a vegetarian, you're not going to be getting enough of that carnitine in your sources because it primarily comes from a red meat. All right, and then finally, the fourth thing you can do is to consider taking coenzyme Q10. Coenzyme Q10 helps carry the electrons around the mitochondria. Now, the only time you don't want to use coenzyme Q10 is if you happen to be taking a drug called atovaquone, which is found in Mepron, also found in Malarone to treat babesia, because the coenzyme Q10 will interfere with how those drugs work to treat your babesia. Okay. Now, just a brief word. Remember, I said there's 3 things you can take to repair the mitochondrial membrane. They're all made by the same company. They're made by a company called Research Nutritionals. The ATP 360 and the ATP fuel both have coenzyme Q10 in them. So again, if you're using an atovaquone-based treatment for babesia, you do not want to use those. Okay? All right. So I've just said a lot of things. Let me go ahead and just do a quick screen share here. Okay. All right, so this is back in a treat line by Marty Ross MD again. Okay, my Lyme disease education site. All right, so in terms of my treatment protocol that I was talking about, and I said, you got to try these steps for at least 6 to 9 months. This is it, okay, right here on this tab, okay? And again, those basic steps are get sleep. Oh, I forgot to mention, be on a good paleo diet. I like paleo diets to help support your mitochondria. And the one I recommend here is this one called the Best Brain Inflammation, Pain, Energy, and Detox Diet Ever. Okay, all right. Third step is lower your cytokines. We talked about that. Fourth step is be on an adaptogen. Fifth step is to balance your hormones. Sixth step, be on a good multivitamin. I forgot to mention that. Number 7, do things to detoxify. And again, that it usually involves being on the liposomal glutathione, which you're going to take as part of mitochondrial repair anyhow. All right. Hold off on exercise for now, and then get your yeast under control. Okay. Do all those basic steps. And in addition, treat your Lyme infection and treat your co-infections. But again, if by 6 to 9 months, you're just not doing much better, then it's time to start thinking about mitochondrial repair. And you want to give it about a 2-month trial. Okay. All right. If those things aren't helping your energy by 2 months, then just stop them. Okay. All right. So in terms of mitochondrial repair, if you want to read more about that, take a look at this article I have called, or a section in my education site called Energy and Fatigue. Okay. And this is the article I have about mitochondria energy, this one called How to Fix Lyme and Get Energy in Lyme Disease. Okay. All right. Now, I also, and then at the bottom of that section, remember I said there's 3 products by research nutritionals to repair the covering. If you want to know what the comparison is between them, I wrote an article about that. That's this one here at the bottom. Okay? All right. All right. Thank you for that question. All right, let's see here. I've got some partial questions that I'm not finding the second parts. Bear with me here a minute. Let's see here. Hello, Amanda. Unfortunately, I don't have a way of allowing people to do verbal questions here. The only way that people can write questions here is to actually write them. Okay. That's the way that the format for this webinar works. All right. Let's see. This is from Barbara. Can you please explain the difference between cytokines and CMVs? I have been struggling with, and let me see if I can follow the next part of that. Here's the third part of your question. Let's see. I've been struggling with chronic Lyme for 6 years and thought I am in remission. All right. So when people use initials, it's hard for me to figure out what they mean exactly. Okay. So you asked, what's the difference between cytokines and CMVs? And the CMV that I am aware of, that stands for cytomegalovirus. Okay. I'm not sure if that's the same CMV you're referring to, though. All right. But so briefly, cytokines are inflammatory chemicals that are made by white blood cells when they see an infection or if they see mold toxins. Okay. All right. Now, and they're good and bad. On the good side, they cause more white blood cells to be made. They draw the white blood cells to where the infection is, and they help them work better. All right. That's basically what cytokines do. But in Lyme and in mold toxin illness and in too many yeast in your intestines, they get made in excess, and in excess, they give you what we call Lyme disease symptoms or mold toxin symptoms, for instance. Okay. All right. Now, CMV stands for a virus called cytomegalovirus, which is a virus that in some people, they may just cohabitate with it. In fact, a majority of people, if they get this virus infection, it's a virus that can live inside your cells and not cause problems. Okay. All right. It's not supposed to cause problems in the majority of people. There is an occasional person that these viruses will grow too much and they become an ongoing source of fatigue. Now, that's if that's the CMV that you mean. Okay. All right. If it is, I have a whole article about how do you deal with chronic virus infections. All right. And what I will tell you, though, is that for most people, chronic viruses are what I call background noise. You may test positive for them, but because they even exist in healthy people, for most people, we don't actually have to treat chronic virus infections like monovirus and Epstein-Barr virus, which is monovirus, cytomegalovirus, parvovirus B19, group of herpes viruses called HHV6 and HHV8. They're respiratory herpes viruses. We don't need to treat for those. Okay. To help decide if you need to treat chronic virus infections, what I usually recommend is doing what's called an experimental blood test, which is to measure a level of enzymes found in the covering of these viruses. And the reason I don't suggest usually doing antibody testing, which is the way most doctors test for them, is remember I said these viruses live in healthy people, right? So most healthy people that aren't having problems, their immune system is going to make antibodies to keep those germs under control. All right. So if you're measuring antibodies, it doesn't tell you whether your immune system has lost the battle to keep those germs under control. What nagalase does is it's a test that looks to see are the viruses making a lot of extra enzyme? Again, this is the enzyme that's found in the covering of the viruses. And if it's elevated, it's a strong suggestion that you have too many viruses living in you, which means that the immune system has lost the battle. Okay. And so in my Seattle practice, I would make decisions to treat for chronic virus infections, usually based on what the nagalase level was. All right. Okay. So again, I'm not sure if that's the CMV you were referring to, but that's the CMV that I know about. Okay. And yes, it could be an ongoing source of fatigue. Okay. All right. Thanks for those questions, Barbara. Bear with me here. I'm trying to clean out the various parts of that question. All right. This next question's going to be a long one. I'm not going to be able to do it. Tracy, I apologize for this. Your question is of a length that if I post it, it's going to jam my computer screen and I won't be able to get to the rest of the questions. If you would like, I could respond to this question, but I'm going to have you rewrite it and just send it to me through my email system. And what I would have you send it to is an email. It's Doc Marty. It's DOCMARTY @ and it's my old practice name. It's The Healing Arts with an S Partnership.net. Okay. Now, everyone, I don't want you all sending your questions to me. I'm offering this to Tracy just because I can't. There's just no way I can post that question. My platform will get jammed by it. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, Tracy. Hello, Lou. Let's see. Would you consider taking up bridge or table tennis instead of motorcycle riding? Lyme docs are a rare and valuable thing, and we want them safe. Lou, I appreciate your concerns. Many of you may know that I one of the things I put in my author bio for a lot of my articles that treat Lyme is that I ride a motorcycle, and I actually ride quite a big motorcycle. It's not a Harley, but it's the same size as one of those big Harleys. It's made by a company called Victory. Lou, the thing is, my motorcycle riding and getting all that adrenaline flow and getting out is something that frees up my head so I can keep managing people with Lyme disease. It's one of the ways that I release all my frustrations and recoup and regenerate, especially after some of the long weeks to keep going forward. So I appreciate your concerns, but no, I'm not giving it up. In fact, actually, tomorrow I leave on a 10-day motorcycle trip from Austin, Texas. I'm riding my bike through kind of a circuitous route through Colorado to Reno, into wine country in California, probably up the Oregon coast, and then up to Seattle. Over the course of about 7 to 10 days is what I'm hoping for. And as part of my beginning of my move back to Seattle, I'm moving my motorcycle first, and I'm going to be meeting with somebody up in Seattle actually to look at a potential clinic space. So I'm doing a 10-day motorcycle trip to get my motorcycle back, but also to begin the process of moving, but also just as a nice vacation because I love doing that. So anyhow, I appreciate your concern. Thank you. Hello, Candace. Good evening, Dr. Ross. What is your opinion as to the merits and usefulness of the Armin Lab Elispot test? Does this test deal with co-infections as well as Lyme? Thanks. So I'd be glad to answer that for you, Ken. So the Elispot is a technique that we can use to see, or it can also be called a T cell activation test. Okay. So T cells are a type of white blood cell that are used to fight viruses and used to fight bacteria. And when they see an infection, they release cytokines. Remember, I talked about cytokines earlier tonight. All right. So what you do with an Elispot, which again is a T cell activation test, is you draw somebody's blood and then you put it in a test tube. You take all their T cells from the blood, put them in a test tube, and then you introduce proteins from the Lyme germ into that test tube. And then you measure whether those T cells release and make cytokines, okay? And if the only way they're going to make and release cytokines is if they've been exposed to those proteins before. So it's trying to see, have they been trying to fight Lyme, all right? Now, the same technique you can do for Bartonella, you can do for Babesia. You're basically taking proteins from those germs, introducing it into the test tube and seeing, do those T cells react by making cytokines, all right? Now, the technique of doing an Elispot has been studied through over numerous infections, and it's thought to have the ability to find infections when they're present about 85% of the time, all right? So that's something we call test sensitivity, the ability to find something if it's there, okay? It's about 85%. So it's not perfect, but it does give you the ability to see if it's there, all right? Now, there's one thing though. So if it's positive, it doesn't mean you have an infection. And what it's measuring with those T cells is those T cells, when they see Lyme or they see a Bartonella or they see a Babesia, will remain reactive for 2 months. And then the body cleans them out and they're gone. So when you're doing one of these T cell activity tests, the Elispot, all that it can really tell you is that sometime in the last 2 months, those white blood cells have seen that infection that you're testing them for. Okay? All right. Now, some of my colleagues, including Armin, who is the head of Armin Labs, have been advocating using this test as a method not only to see if you've had the infection, but to see how active it might be in you or if it's still active in you or not. And I totally disagree with using the test this way. That is not what this test was designed for, okay? So when you get this Elispot test back, you get they tell you how reactive it is, and it ranges from 1+ to 3+, all right? So the idea is that it's more reactive if you have a 3+, for instance, all right? So some of my colleagues have taken that as a sign that if it's 3+, it must mean you have a lot of that germ still active in you. Well, the problem is these infections release chemicals that can suppress your immune system. So they may be turning down your T cells so they can't quite react strongly enough. And you may still have lots of the infection in you, but only get a minor reaction on this test, all right? So it's not accurate to think that the degree of reactivity tells you whether you've got a lot of activity of this infection. Also, some of my colleagues will try measuring it at the beginning of treatment and somewhere in the middle. And if they see less activity on it, then they take that as a sign that the treatment must be working. Well, not necessarily. It just may mean that maybe the immune system has become more suppressed with treatment too. The other thing some of my colleagues will do is they will do this test to see if a person is done with treatment, all right? And they'll take a test that is a negative test as a sign that the infection must be gone, all right? Now, here's the problem with that. Lyme likes to hide in places where the immune system can't see it, all right? Lyme hates oxygen, and the blood is full of oxygen. And the reason Lyme hates oxygen is oxygen will kill it. So Lyme likes to get out of the blood. It likes to hide in tissues that don't have good blood flow. So what could be happening if you get this T cell activation test, the Elispot, and it comes back negative, it may mean, especially in the case of Lyme, that the germ is just hiding in a place where it can't be seen, okay? So in terms of a test that can find out if you have had Lyme in you or it may still be in you, this test can find it 85% of the time. So it's a test that says, yes, it could be in you, okay? But to use it as a monitoring tool to see where you are in infection or to see if you are done, I think is wrong. I don't think that is what the test was designed for. And the issue again is if it is negative, it may mean the germ is just hiding, or it could mean the germ is doing a great job of releasing chemicals that suppress the immune system, so it's just not reacting. Okay? All right. Thank you for that question, Ken. Hello, Virginia. Let's see. Hi, besides babesia, what else can cause breathing problems? I wake up with heart racing like my body is fighting something. I have strep, Lyme, Bartonella, and other infections. Um, Thank you. I feel like a scraping inside my lungs that is very uncomfortable, and I wake up with heart racing like my body is trying. Let me see if there was a second part to that, Virginia. Virginia, I'm not seeing a second part to your question, but let me just make a comment. So, your heart rate is under the control of a part of your nervous system, which is called the autonomic nervous system. That part of your nervous system makes adrenaline and anti-adrenaline. Okay. And one of the nerves that regulates the autonomic nervous system is comes off at the base of the skull here, and it's called the vagal nerve. It's something called a cranial nerve. It's a group of nerves that come off right here in the back of your head, and the vagal nerve is also known as cranial nerve 10. Okay, all right. Now remember, it's supposed to regulate your heart rate. All right. So Lyme infection, the germ Lyme, has the ability to infect the vagal nerve and make it work incorrectly. So if it becomes dysregulated, you may get racing of the heart from that. Okay. Babesia also can sometimes give you instability within this adrenaline, anti-adrenaline system. And that can give you racing of the heart as well, too. All right. So it could be babesia. The other thing that limits blood flow in the body into the lungs sometimes can be Bartonella. Bartonella can infect the lining of the inside of your blood vessels, causing those cells that line the inside to swell into the opening of the blood vessels, limiting blood flow. And that can sometimes give you a sense of not getting enough oxygen, which could trigger heart racing as well, too. Okay. So those are some ideas. The other thing is we have to be careful not to put our Lyme blinders on to see everything is being caused by Lyme. It is possible. I mean, if you're having a lot of trouble with racing of the heart, this is a reason to potentially see a cardiologist who may not agree with Lyme, but at least to rule out all the other things that can cause electrical problems and other problems of the heart that can give you periods of racing of your heart as well, too. Okay? All right. In terms of things that give you the feeling of shortness of breath, the big ones would be babesia. Bartonella sometimes can too. Okay, and that's because again it can narrow the opening of your blood vessels, making it so you're not getting as good a blood flow to the lungs, which gives you that sense of just not getting enough oxygen to your body too. Okay, all right. Good luck to you, Virginia. Hello, Maria. Let's see. What do you recommend for tingling of the feet as well as pain in the heel? So, tingling often is a sign of nerve injury, which can be from infection, could be from heavy metals, could be from diabetes. So, the one thing about tingling is make sure that you've talked to your doctor about it so they can do blood testing to figure out do you have diabetes? Maybe do you have heavy metals that's giving that problem too? And do you have Lyme infection or even Bartonella sometimes can do that too? Okay, so make sure that they've looked for possible causes of it. Okay, all right. Now, it also, again, is a sign of nerve injury. All right, so if you have infections involved in injuring your nerve, treat your infections. If you have heavy metal toxicity involved in injuring the nerves, make sure you're removing those heavy metals, doing chelation therapy, for instance. Okay, all right, all right. But in terms of repairing the injury to the nerves, the one thing that can be really useful is to get on glutathione, and that's to be on liposomal glutathione. Remember, I talked about liposomal glutathione earlier tonight. It's glutathione that's microscopically wrapped in fat. So glutathione, I didn't say a lot about it then, but let me talk more about it. So glutathione is made in every one of our cells. It's the master reparative antioxidant. Our cells make it to repair damage and to keep damage from happening from the inside. Okay, all right. Now, if you've got cells that are injured, like nerve cells injured, for instance, sometimes they will deplete their glutathione supply and then they can't heal. So sometimes we have to give you glutathione to build the supply back up inside of those cells. All right. So one function of glutathione is the fixer. Okay. Secondly, it's used in higher concentrations in the liver to actually help detoxify. So we use it. It's useful for doing detoxification. All right. Third thing that it can do is an antioxidant. It's very useful at lowering oxidizing agents that can damage tissues and also damage mitochondria, but also those oxidizing agents, especially as part of a Herxheimer reaction, trigger extra cytokines to be made in white blood cells. So taking glutathione can help them break a Herxheimer reaction as well too. Okay, so glutathione is useful for detox problems and supporting detox. Glutathione is useful for repairing cell injury. Glutathione, as I mentioned earlier, can help repair mitochondria from the inside, and glutathione can be used to limit Herxheimer reactions. All right. Now, the thing about glutathione is there's an issue with absorption. And that is that if you just take regular glutathione, a lot of it will get destroyed in the gut. It's not going to get absorbed. So what some companies have done, including Research Nutritionals, is they've microscopically wrapped their glutathione in fat to increase the absorption. And Research Nutritionals has gone one step further. They've actually studied their product to see, does it get absorbed in increased amounts, okay? And so they did a study looking at their Trifortify product and looking at blood cell levels, the cell levels of glutathione. And they've got good studies that show marked increases in cellular glutathione when people were taking their product, okay? So it seems like it can be useful for that, all right? So in terms of how much you might want to take, if somebody's got tingling, in my practice, what I would have them do is 5 milliliters one time a day of one of those Research Nutritionals products, and Trifortify watermelon or Trifortify orange. That's the 2 flavors that they use. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question. Good luck to you. Hello, Barry. Hold on here just a minute. All right, let's see here. Good evening, Dr. Ross. Let's see. My wife has chronic Lyme with babesia and Barg, I think you mean Bartonella, and suffers with incredible fatigue. Her TSH and T4 are normal, but her T3 is low. How best can we boost up T3 to increase energy production? Thanks. So T4, so let's talk about thyroid real quickly. Okay, so the thyroid gland sits here in your neck, all right? And it's controlled by part of your brain, which is called the hypothalamus and pituitary. The hypothalamus pituitary releases a chemical called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. And it makes it to tell the thyroid gland to make thyroid hormone. The thyroid gland makes 2 kinds of thyroid hormone. It makes something called T4 and something called T3, and it probably makes some other varieties too, but those are the 2 main ones we follow, all right? The difference between T4 and T3, there's a couple. Number 1, T4 has 4 pieces of iodine on it, and T3 has 3 pieces of iodine on it, okay? That's where you come up with T4 and T3, all right? The other thing is that the majority of what is made by the thyroid gland is T4, and then the limited T3 that it makes plus the majority T4 that it makes gets into your bloodstream and goes out to the tissues where that T4 is converted inside the cells into T3. Okay? All right. All right. Now, the standard model of thyroid is that if the brain makes TSH to tell the thyroid to make thyroid gland. And if the brain thinks you're not having enough thyroid, it'll make increased amounts of TSH. It will start screaming at the thyroid gland, make more thyroid, and so your TSH should be high, okay? So the standard view in medicine is that the only way you have low thyroid, either inside your cells in terms of T3 or in terms of both T4 and T3, is if the TSH is elevated, all right? The trouble is that model doesn't work well in chronic infection illnesses like Lyme disease, all right? So there's a newer idea out there, which is that in chronic infection states, one of the things that happens is that the tissues, the cells, are not able to convert all that T4 into T3. And the brain is not correctly interpreting what's going on in your cells. So the TSH may still be normal, but you could have T3 starvation in your cells, if you will, all right? So many of us have been thinking about this and trying to figure out, well, how do we really tell if somebody has low thyroid, all right? So one of the things to do is just look at your symptoms. Symptoms have some meaning here, okay? So symptoms of low thyroid could be cold intolerance, fatigue, a change in periods. Those would be some signs of low thyroid. Dry skin, and reflexes in your knees, for instance, that aren't as quick, okay? All right. And if you have those symptoms in chronic infections, sometimes it's okay just to give thyroid to try to see if you can raise it up. There is a newer test, though, that some of us do, which is something called reverse T3, okay? And this probably is a better way of telling whether you have T3 problems. The trouble with measuring T3 in your blood is it may not really reflect the T3 levels inside your cells, all right? So one of the things that happens when the body gets under stress from chronic infections is that it purposely tries to make it so that you're not going to, it tries to go into hibernation. It tries to slow metabolism way down to protect the body, okay? And the way that it does that is by taking the T4 and instead of converting it into T3, it converts it into another chemical called reverse T3. Now we can measure reverse T3. So one other way to figure out if you have low thyroid is to do a panel that measures TSH, T4, T3, and reverse T3, all right? And if your reverse T3 is elevated, that means you've got a lot of T4 that's being shunted over to this reverse T3, and it's not being turned into the T3 that your cells need to run, okay? So in my practice, what I was doing in Seattle is I was making a decision whether to try thyroid in a person based on either their symptoms, because I don't trust TSH and T4 testing in Lyme, or I would go one step further and measure this chemical called reverse T3, all right? Now, if I determined that based on reverse T3 symptoms or, levels, or based on symptoms that they had low thyroid, what I would like to do is give them some T3. And one way to do that is to use a type of thyroid that comes from ground up thyroid gland from pork. And that's something called armor thyroid, also known as desiccated thyroid, okay? Now, desiccated thyroid is a mixture of T4 and T3. All right, so that's one way to get your T3. Another way to get T3 is just take T3, and there's a prescription variety of that, which is called Cytomel, is a form of T3 as well too. Okay, so those would be some thoughts for you to look at. All right, now this is really a complicated area, and I've written a whole article. I mean, a very long article. Actually, I used this article to explain what I do to my medical board. That's the kind of detail that I used in it because of their concerns over my practice. All right. So let me show you this article that's based on what I sent to a bunch of doctors, and I tried to turn it into English as well too. Take a look at my section on hormones. Here it is, right there. And then take a look at this article called Hypothyroid, the Best Tests, Medicines, and Vitamins, okay? And I will tell you, this is a longer article, but take a read of it and you will see further explanation of these ideas that I was just describing to you, okay? All right. All right. Good luck to you, Barry. Hello, Nicole. Let's see. Hi, Martin. For Lyme, I have taken Nutrimedix, Banderol, and Cemento. and due to cost, switched to the Wildcraft's Otoba bark and cat's claw at the same dose, 30 drops of each twice a day. I recently spoke with a naturalist that suggested I switch to Uncarine Max, which will provide a more concentrated dose of cat's claw, and take this along with the Otoba, 10 drops of each twice a day. He mentioned the original cat's claw I was using wasn't coming close to addressing Lyme, and about 3 ounces of cat's claw is what I would need if I didn't switch to the Uncare Max. The brands suggested were from Rainforest Pharmacy and very reasonably priced. What are your thoughts on the Eucarine Max versus cat's claw and these dosages for a smaller adult? Thanks for everything. You know, Nicole, it's hard to say. The problem is in the world of supplement tinctures, there's not standardization. I cannot tell you between one product how many milligrams of the active chemicals do they have in a teaspoon or in 5 milliliters or in 1 drop versus another one. There is no standardization of it, okay? I really can't tell you. Mostly my dosing I've come up with is based on what I see works, based on also some of the recommendations that Buhner would use in his herbal recommendations, all right? And what I will tell you is the strength of the Otoba and cat's claw from Wildcraft Herbs I found to be stronger than what I was seeing with the Nutrimetics products. And one of the reasons I think that is so is they use more plant to create their extraction, quite a bit more plant. Secondly, the process that they were using in their extractions, Wildcraft Herbs used a much higher alcohol concentration, and it's that alcohol concentration that's responsible for drawing all those active chemicals out, okay? So I found in my practice that even though I had people use the same amount of drops of the Wildcraft Otoba versus what they were using with Banderol, and the Wildcraft Cat's Claw versus what they were using with the Cemento from Nutrimetics, I still had them use the same dosing, but I found better results in the Wildcraft Herbs product because I think it's stronger. Okay, I don't have the experience using this other product to be able to tell you what I think of that dosing. I honestly don't know. Okay, all right. One other word I would just tell everyone. So many of you know that the Wildcraft Herbs product, that the Otoba bark, which is the equivalent of Nutrimetics Banderol, has been out of supply for quite some time. The Wildcraft Herbs lost its source of Otoba. They had identified another source, and then because of export problems, they finally have had to come up with even another source. And I'm told that probably we'll have to see how this goes because I've been told before, but hopefully over the next couple of months, we're going to start seeing a product come back on market again. We'll see how that goes. I'm hopeful that they get another product supplier back because I like their product and it's so much cheaper than what the Nutrimetics product are. Okay. All right. Anyhow, that's where things are right now. Thank you for the question, Nicole. Good luck to you. Let's see. Barbara, I found the second part of your question here. Let's see. Remember you said, what's the difference between cytokines and CMV? And I said, I think you're talking about cytomegalovirus. You are. You're talking about cytomegalovirus. So here, however, the latest test again shows that my cytomegalovirus IgG is 5.1 and IgM 43.1 are sky high. Yet my general doctors claim I do not have Lyme and that I should ignore the test results. So listen, as I said earlier, again, the antibody levels I don't trust because all that it may mean is that your immune system is doing a great job keeping these infections that live even in healthy people under control, okay? And so what I would suggest doing is looking at that test called a nagalase. I doubt if your infectious disease doctors will do it for you. You'll probably need to find a naturopath that would be willing to do it. If you want to show them, you're going to need to bring something written to them that explains this. Let me just show you my written article about it, okay? Let's see here. Let's look at the test section here. All right, so take a look at this article here called When and How to Treat Chronic Viruses in Lyme, a brief guide, okay? And then to print off the material, what you can do, because I don't have a big print function here, is you could actually just do I usually will do a right click on my mouse and click the print, but some way to do a screen print is what you want to do. And then bring that to your physician. I talk about the testing, why IgG antibody levels are not to be trusted, and this idea of doing a nagalase level right here. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Barbara. Hello, Eric. I see. Hi, Dr. Ross. My TSH came back at 8.2. Free T4 was 0.7. The range is 0.8 to 1.9. Free T3 was 3.2. And reverse T3 was low at 8. Reference range 8 to 25. Should I be concerned about my thyroid function? Are the results enough to cause symptoms? I am currently pulsing with Bactrim, rifampin, and augmentin. So, Eric, based just on those blood test levels, again, if you had low peripheral low thyroid, meaning you weren't making adequate T3 in the tissues from T4, I would expect to see reverse T3 quite high, and we're not seeing that. So I don't think you have from at least the testing, it doesn't look like I would call that a peripheral low thyroid issue, okay? Your other test with the TSH, so the TSH, let's talk about that real quickly. So TSH, again, is a chemical made by the hypothalamus pituitary that talks to your thyroid and says, make thyroid, all right? And so if the brain doesn't think there's enough T4 or T3, it's going to make higher amounts of TSH, all right? All right. Now, the level of TSH that I use is 2.5 or lower is normal. Above 2.5 is high, meaning the brain is working harder to tell your thyroid to make more thyroid, meaning you have low thyroid, all right? Now, that's the standard I use. That's the standards that most integrative medicine doctors use. The regular physicians, regular endocrinologists will usually not recognize the TSH as being high unless it's 10 or higher. So you would be told that's a normal one. The trouble is that the way that, and what the issue is between normal endocrinologists and integrative medicine doctors is we look to figure out how did they come up with normal levels, all right? And so when we develop normal levels of a blood test, we basically pull a bunch of people off the street, draw their blood, and we see where do 95% of people fall into? What's the range that 95% of people fall into? And we call that artificially normal, all right? Now, the problem is when they originally came up with TSH levels, in that group of people, they included people that had the beginning of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, but yet did not have a solid science of it, okay? So they've been able to go back now and do further studies. And in those further studies, what they've done is they look at people's thyroid by doing ultrasounds. And if somebody had an swollen thyroid gland, that's the beginning of what Hashimoto's thyroiditis looks like, they would remove them as somebody to be tested. And if you remove all people that have swollen thyroid glands from these people that get tested to decide normal, you find that a TSH is normal if it's 2.5 or lower. Once you remove these people that have early thyroid disease, all right? So based on that, your TSH being above 2.5, and also the fact that your T4 is also less than the normal range, suggests to me that you do have a non-peripheral low thyroid. You have central peripheral low thyroid, meaning throughout the blood system and everything. And that is a situation with labs like this that I usually would give thyroid medication with the goal of getting that TSH down so it's less than 2.5. Okay? All right. You may want, for more information about that, take a look at my thyroid article, that long one that I just showed earlier. That gives you a lot more detail around it. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, George. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Is getting Bartonella rashes a sign that Bartonella is active, part of a herx, or why do they appear? If so, can Bartonella affect hormones such as thyroid and cortisol? All right. So the way that Bartonella can affect hormones is that it causes white blood cells to produce cytokines, and excess cytokines can interfere with hormones. Lyme also causes white blood cells to overproduce cytokines, and they interfere with hormone production. So in other words, Bartonella can interfere with hormone production like your thyroid the same way that any infection would, and that's through the cytokine excess. Okay? All right. In terms of Bartonella rashes, I've seen them get worse during treatments, even though all the other signs that a person had Bartonella was getting better. I've seen them improve. So I don't know that they're the most useful way to track what is happening with a Bartonella treatment. Okay. All right. Yeah, I think I answered your question there. Good luck to you. Hello, Susan. See, hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you for ongoing support for us. You're welcome. Have you come across anyone else with normal pressure hydrocephalus? They can't risk operating and don't know what caused it. So normal pressure hydrocephalus is a condition where you basically have some swelling, enlargement of the fluid chambers on the inside of the brain. Okay. I am not aware that Lyme is a cause of that. I have seen it in children before during my training when I was doing pediatric rotations in the hospital as part of my training out at Georgetown, but I haven't seen it occur in people with Lyme, nor have I seen any information to suggest that it happens in people with Lyme. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Thanks for the question. Hello, Sherry. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Marty. Thanks again so much for sharing all your great insight. You're welcome. Let's see. How much activated charcoal would you recommend to take for ochratoxin A and how often? Can you take too much activated charcoal? Also, I've been on low dose naltrexone now for a few years at 2.5 milligrams a day. If I get off, I feel worse, but can I stay on it forever? And then last question is that since I started treating Babesia more aggressively at night, when I'm trying to fall asleep, I will get itchy. I also have Bartonella. Could it be Bartonella is getting more active? I am treating Bartonella with Pseudoacuta, Houttenia, Ellison, and Japanese knotweed. Thank you. All right, let me kind of work backwards on this. All right, so itching, it's hard for me to say. I mean, I don't think that itching means anything is more active. All right, I don't think of itching as being a symptom of any of the infections that you just stated. All right. Now, keep in mind with itching, there can be a lot of causes of itching. All right. So number one, bring it up with your physicians. They should be doing some basic blood testing to see how your kidney and liver are working. Okay. Number two, it could be that you are having a minor allergic reaction giving you itching to something that you're taking. And so one thing I would do with my patients is if I decided blood testing was normal and I started wondering it could be something that a person is taking, I might start stopping things, maybe one at a time, stop something and see if the itching got better, see if I could identify it, okay? Again, talk to your doctor before you do this though, okay? All right. The other thing that can give itching is dry skin, all right? So take a look at your skin. If it seems very dry, start moisturizing. You'll be amazed what can happen with itchy skin just by doing moisturization. Okay? All right. All right. Now, in terms of treating ochratoxin A, generally what I would try to do in my practice with that is to start the activated charcoal initially at 500 milligrams 2 or 3 times a day, and as tolerated based on somebody getting, if you try to detox too quickly, you might get worse, okay? Based as tolerated, I might try to work up to 1,500 milligrams 2 or 3 times a day, all right? That would just be what I would do in my practice, okay? Let's see. In terms of the low-dose naltrexone, we don't have long-term safety studies, however. In looking at how it is proposed to work at managing and regulating the immune system and helping with pain, in my opinion, I would see no harm in somebody just remaining on this years, maybe through a lifetime. I just don't see how it's going to cause long-term problems. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question. Good luck to you, too. All right, so for anyone that's wondering what does LDN mean, I'm just going to do a quick screen share here. All right, so low-dose naltrexone, LDN, is a narcotic blocker, but it has a way of helping to regulate the immune system and regulate pain. It can be quite helpful for some people with Lyme. I'm not going to go into it in detail here right now, but I'm just going to show you, if you want to read an article about it, take a look at it right here. It's this LDN for Lyme, okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Sherry. Good luck. Hello, Maria. Let's see. What do you recommend for a Bartonella maintenance protocol? What do you recommend for CIRS? All right. So for Bartonella, most of the time you don't need to be on a maintenance protocol. Again, in my practice, I was able to get rid of Bartonella about 95% of the time. So, and that involves using 2 agents that treat it. These are antibiotics that are intracellular antibiotics that get inside cells and work there. And if I did that and somebody wasn't getting better, I might even do 3 intracellular agents, okay? Now, your prescription agents are going to work to get rid of Bartonella. Any 2 that I put a person on, I found would work about 80 to 85% of the time. The herbal options would be to use Sita acuta and Hutania, and those might work about 70 to 75% of the time. So before saying that you need to do a maintenance to keep it under control, I would try to make sure that you did a good enough job trying to get rid of it, okay? So if you're a person that treated your Bartonella, and again, a minimum length of time you should treat Bartonella for is 4 to 6 months, and you should be able to knock it out, judging by what most of the symptoms tell you, okay? But if you don't, or if it comes back the second time, I might use a 3-drug combination to treat it of 3 different kinds of intracellular agents, okay? All right. Rarely, if I had somebody that kept having relapses, I might put them on something to help control it. That's rare. And in that case, I would try to do it herbally, because the herbs tend not to have such a bad consequence on the gut, all right? And for that, I would use the Sita acuta and the Hutania. And normally when I use those at full dose, I would do a Hutania at 30 drops twice a day and a Sita acuta at a quarter teaspoon 3 times a day. You might do half the dose on that as part of a maintenance program, okay? All right. So these are all straight. Let me just show you a quick article about that. I'm going to come back and answer about CIRS here in just a second. All right. So in terms of treating Bartonella, again, take a look in my infection treatment plans section here. And then click on this Kills of Bartonella brief guide. And I'd take a look at, I break my treatments into the 3 different tiers. The strongest ones are all in this tier 1. And basically, I usually would suggest you might do either a rifamycin-based treatment, which would be things like rifabutin or rifampin, or a Bactrim sulfa-based treatment, all right? And so if you're going to do 3 drugs, for instance, you could do a rifampin coupled with a minocycline, coupled with a Bactrim, for instance, okay? The other thing So anyhow, those are just some ideas for you. Okay, and I talk about the Hutania and the Siddha Akuti here too. All right. Okay. All right. So let me talk about chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is a condition that was coined or developed. The idea of it was developed by a physician named Richie Shoemaker. All right. And what I will tell you is I don't think it works in Lyme disease. I think he's got a nice theory, but I don't believe it's a real condition. I know that may be heresy, but let me tell you why I'm saying that. All right. All right. So Dr. Richie Shoemaker did a great job for the world in discovering this thing called mold toxin illness. Okay. And he's the granddaddy. He's the founder of the idea. The trouble is, I don't think he has kept pace with where the science has gone. And he is increasingly becoming isolated, but there's still a lot of physicians that are training with him, learning about mold toxicity and this other thing called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, of which mold toxicity in his theory is part of it. Okay. So what the idea is with Dr. Shoemaker is he thinks that there's stuff that creates a lot of ongoing inflammation in the body. And his first thought about what could be causing that is mold toxin illness. And so if you have mold toxin illness and you discover it and you remove mold toxins and you're still sick, then in his protocol, he says there must be something else causing all that chronic inflammation. Let's start working through different steps to identify what it could be. All right. And basically what his idea is that perhaps if you've had chronic mold in you, it set off this inflammatory process that just becomes inflammation, triggering more inflammation, triggering more inflammation. You just get into this endless loop. And he calls that chronic inflammatory response syndrome. All right. Okay. Now, the part of the problem with Dr. Shoemaker is he doesn't believe in chronic Lyme. And that's the big problem with his theory. Okay. So yes, if you remove mold toxins and somebody still stays sick, there probably is still something else triggering all that inflammation. In Shoemaker's theory, because he doesn't believe in chronic Lyme, what he says to look for next is to see if your nose is infected or colonized with a bacteria called Marcons. All right. And if it has Marcons, and you're supposed to do a nose spray with antibiotics in it and take a medicine called rifampin to get rid of that Marcons. And that if you get rid of the Marcons and you're still sick, then there's next test you're supposed to do and other interventions you're supposed to do. All right. So I never found any of those to work in Lyme disease. The only thing I ever found to be effective in Lyme disease was getting mold toxins out. When it comes to Marcons, you can't really get rid of the stuff. I mean, you can get rid of it temporarily, but often it's going to come back. And treating it, I never found to make a difference. Even when I was able to get it removed, I never saw anyone get better. All right. So I don't believe in chronic inflammatory response syndrome. I know there's a bunch of people that are training with Shoemaker on it, but in the world of Lyme, I don't think it applies. I don't think his theories work. So yes, you get rid of your mold toxins, but then the next step to get inflammation under control is get Lyme and get the co-infections out. And Shoemaker will not go down that pathway because Shoemaker doesn't believe in those infections. And the reason I think that a lot of Shoemaker's other steps didn't work in the world of Lyme is that people still have their Lyme infection and their Bartonella and their Babesia that are triggering all of this inflammation. Okay? All right. So anyhow, I hope that gives you some insight on that. Hello, Laura C. Do you have any suggestions to help a person with chronic Lyme, Babesia, and Bartonella who has developed chemical sensitivities to most chemicals and to mold? Thank you very much. Laura, to give you the best answer, I would need to ask you a lot of questions, which obviously I can't do in this kind of a format. The one thing I would tell you that you might want to take a look at, something to consider, okay, is when you have chronic infections and also mold toxicity, you may become more sensitive over time due to a condition that develops called Mast Cell Activation Syndrome. Okay, so let me talk about that. So mast cells are cells in your body where histamines are manufactured. All right. And historically, most of us were taught in medical school that mast cells will make histamines and release them when something you're allergic to basically attaches to the mast cell. All right. And so we only thought that they were involved just in allergies. That was it. All right. But there's actually some newer research, and actually research showing Lyme involvement in this too, that shows that infections trigger the mast cells to make histamines and to become more sensitive to everything that could trigger histamine release. Okay, so they kind of turn them on. And then also these infections cause the mast cells to overproduce cytokines. So these mast cells don't only make histamines, they actually make cytokines as well too. Mold toxin illness can do that too. So one of the things I found in my practice is if I was treating somebody and during the course of treatment they became more sick and more sensitive, then it's time to start thinking about, could they have Mast Cell Activation Syndrome? Okay. And if they do, there are things you can do to help stabilize those mast cells. There's herbs you can take, supplements you can take. All right. So that's just something to think about. All right. Let me show you the article that I have written about that. All right. The other thing that's interesting about Mast Cell Activation Syndrome is one of the things that can be quite useful at dealing with it is stress, anxiousness. Stress actually triggers your mast cells to be more active. So one thing to think about if people have it is make sure you're doing basic things like maybe meditating or other activities to de-stress. Be on herbs that help stabilize those mast cells, but also keep treating your infections as best as you can because they're turning those mast cells on too, okay? All right, so where you're gonna find my article about mast cell activation is in the immune system section here. It's this article called Mast Cell Activation Syndrome and Lyme. All right, and the things that can, again, lead to it is Lyme, other things you might be allergic to, drugs, molds can do it, toxins, stress, and viruses, okay? All right, so those are some things. I've got a whole video in here about it too, and then there's a list of symptoms that make you think about it. And then what can you do about it, okay, which is decrease stress, remove the things you might be reacting to, treat your infections, get the toxins out, lower cytokines, and then block your histamines and stabilize the cells that make them. And there's a number of prescriptions, and there are herbs, the big one being quercetin and something called luteolin that can help. And there's another supplement called Histoquel that has a number of things in it also that can stabilize the mast cells too, okay? And then finally, get on a low histamine diet can make a big difference too, okay? All right. So Laura, you might even want to talk to your doctor about this because working through this and trying to figure out if that is what the cause is should take the help of a physician or your healthcare provider as well too, okay? All right. Hello, Will. Let me see. Could you recommend any brands or types of saunas for detoxify from mold and possible help with nerve regeneration? Yeah, I don't know the best brands for this. I'm sorry. I don't have that as an idea. I probably ought to put a list together. I haven't looked into it before to be able to tell you that, William. All right. Okay. All right, everyone. That's I'm ready to take another question, but I didn't realize that's it for me for tonight. Again, great being here with you tonight. I know I took last week off. I'm going to be taking next week off too. As I said, I'm riding my motorcycle back to Seattle in part to do a vacation, but also to begin the process of finding clinic space to reopen there. So just be aware that I won't be here next week. Tomorrow morning, though, in the email, when I send it out with information about the recording for the night's webinar, there will be a link to sign up for the next webinar, which will be in 2 weeks. Okay. All right. Been good being here with everyone tonight. I hope you all got some useful information. A couple of requests I have for you. Number one, if you like the information that I'm providing here at my Lyme disease information site, be sure to share it. Recently, Google search has gone through some changes where they are no longer ranking sites like mine that provide alternative medicine ideas on how you treat complex problems. So it used to be you could do a bedtime search and ask your questions about Lyme disease and my website would show up. It's not going to show up anymore. So the only way that people are going to find out about Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD is word of mouth these days. I'd appreciate if you would share it so people can get the helpful information there too. Also share about these webinars so that they know to sign up with it as well too, okay? The second thing I want to say is that I now have a YouTube channel. And you would go to YouTube and just type Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. You'll find my channel. It would be great if you would subscribe to that. That's where I'm starting to post a lot of my videos. And when I do post them, you'll get notification if you subscribe. And I'd appreciate if you would do that as well too. All right. So good to see everyone tonight. I hope everyone keeps healing, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Good night.